Hello and welcome back to my garden. I think we're on to day 3 now of the 30-day Blitz challenge. This is where I try to do a video every single day for the next 30 days, trying to accomplish many of the tasks I need to accomplish here around the garden for the fall, or fall projects, or preparing the garden for winter. All these things that normally need to get done, and I have a long list of them as I mentioned in my first video, so I won't bore you with that anymore. Well, what I will mention is that for between October 15th, which I think might be today, not sure, and November 8th, if you head over to Epic Gardening and buy anything from their store, whether it be a birdie's bed like I have here in the garden, or a book, or seed starting trays, or anything like that, you'll get to save yourself an extra 10% if you use the code GROWING. So if you use the code GROWING at checkout, you can save yourself an extra 10% on anything you might buy from Epic Gardening. You may need seed starting trays for if you're doing fall crops, or even start stocking up for next spring, or again, if you want a book to read. I think there's Kevin's got a couple of books over there, and there's a bunch of stuff over at Epic Gardening store. So if you haven't checked it out, go check it out. All the links will be below, and again, use the code GROWING to save yourself 10%. All right, enough of that. What are we doing today? We're saving peonies. Well, we're not really. Well, yeah, we are kind of saving peonies. I have peonies scattered all throughout this garden. I have them here in the rose garden, here in the front bed garden, and believe it or not, somewhere in there, I have more here in the flower garden. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to dig up all of my peonies and move them to one location. And there's numerous reasons why. One is none of my peonies have flowered except for Sandra Bernhardt here in the flower garden, and right now it's getting swallowed up by the Canna and Gladiolus. So I think it's best to move it out of the flower garden, or at least in the spot it's in the flower garden, and move it to a different location. I have living coral and I think another variety or two over in the rose garden, and I always seem to kind of forget about them, and then I see this green foliage and I go, oh, that's my peonies, but they've never flowered in the 4 years that they've been there. And then maybe 3 years, either way. And then there's the one in the front of the house beds, and I've never seen that one flower either. It grows, the foliage looks good and healthy. It's never flowered. So I think I'm going to make the radical decision to dig up all my peonies now, here in the fall, and move them to one location in the flower garden and put them all together. Now, doing this, I theoretically should be able to keep a closer eye on them, monitor them. They'll all be in, I think, a better, sunnier spot, although I don't know if the intense heat here in eastern North Carolina in the summertime will negatively affect them or not. And of course, this will be setting all of them back, because from my understanding, and I've kind of seen this happen, if you newly plant a peony, it won't flower for roughly 3 years, give or take. It may flower in year 2 or it may flower in year 4, but generally it's 3 years. And I could wait to see if they flower over in the rose garden, over someplace else, but I just don't think that they're in good locations, and I just don't give them maybe the attention that they need. I'm not sure. But I think if I move them all together, I can keep better track of them, keep better watch over them, and then hopefully in 3 years, they'll flower again. If you think I'm crazy, or you have a different opinion, or if you have any opinion or any comments, please feel free to leave them below. But now, while it's relatively cool out, I think it's the best time to do this. So let me go dig them all up, and I'll show you where we're going to plant them.
Many hours later.
All right, so I dug all of my peonies up, or at least I think this is all the peonies that were scattered throughout the garden. There were actually 1, 2, 3 in the rose garden, and I found 2 in the flower garden where I only thought there was 1. I actually forgot about 1. So that's been moved, or dug up, I should say. And I'm going to go over each one in a little more detail here in a second. All right, so behind me, I have already planted a Victoria de la Marnie peony. So I got Victoria de la Marnie peony. I'll put the names on the screen too. Right here, looking really rough. You guys probably can't see it because of the shade, but either way, is living coral, Festivia maxima peony, Sandra Bernhardt. I actually have 2 Sandra Bernhardts. I have a Marie Lemon Peony, Duchess d'Amour. I think there's a lot of French sounding names. Were the French known for cultivating peonies? If you guys know the answers, leave those comments below. And last but not least is Carl Rosenfeld. Now some of these, like the Carl Rosenfeld, it's pretty bulky. I don't know if I'll be able to get a division out of that. I did get a division out of one of these. It actually just fell apart. I tried to keep as much of the root system intact as possible. My goal here isn't to necessarily divide them. It's just to sort of transplant them, put them all in one general area where I could keep a better eye on them, monitor them, baby them, and then maybe sometime in the future as the garden takes on more of a design aesthetic, and maybe then I'll move them to someplace else or scatter them once again, but that's years down the road. First and foremost, we have to ensure that these survive. So, cue the music and let me start planting. Okay, before I cue the music, I just want to make a note here how I'm planting them. Peonies you don't have to plant particularly deep according to the instructions, and I've never planted them particularly deep, even in New York, which was surprising. They withstood the freezing ground, and it's probably because most of their roots are so thick. So for instance, here's Marie Lemon. You can see how thick some of those roots are. You can also see there's a lot of eyes on this one. I'll cut this top part off, but hopefully you can see all the eyes that are on this one, which means there'll be new stems for next year. I just loosened up some of the soil here, and what I'm going to do is basically, I have to be careful here because there's probably some weeds in here. Let's get that top growth cut off. There we go. We're going to sort of tuck this in. Now, again, I get torrential downpours and the ground can get quite sodden, and peonies do not like very wet feet. So what I'm going to do is basically put these at ground level and then mound up over them. Of course, mulching on top of that. So that should keep them elevated, not in such sodden ground. Because if I bury them below ground level, because you're supposed to plant peonies no deeper than basically, I think, an inch. If I'm mistaken about that, please leave those comments below. But if I planted it and we had those sodden winter days where just 8 inches of rain in a week, then there's a good chance that the peonies could wind up rotting, which I don't want. So again, I'm going to plant them basically ground level and then mound up over them and then mulch on top of that, and they should be okay. I've had them planted like this here before. Be careful not to break too many roots here. Just want to make sure I get that tucked in. Where's my compost? Now there is going to be some sort of transplant shock, but I think now during the fall is probably a good time to be planting them. Again, here my ground never freezes in growing zone 8B, so I don't have to worry about that. All right, so Marie is planted, and I'm going to continue that pattern throughout. I'm not particularly planting these in any particular order, although they all will be in this general vicinity. Hopefully, as you can see, I've got them all planted. Sandra Bernhardt's over here. I have another variety over there and here and here and here. So this whole area will be flowering hopefully in 3 years. But the biggest challenge right now is just to hope that they thrive, survive the winter, that kind of thing. I will obviously be watering all of this in off camera, not going to bore you guys. I don't know if you guys can see this, but right now I have a chocolate chip tobacco plant here, Nicotina nicotiana, something like that, flowering, and it's quite lovely. And the keen eye of you may have noticed, and I'm not even sure it'll make it into the final edit, but I had a dark opal basil plant here. I yanked it out of the ground because it was going to be in the way of where I wanted Sandra Bernhardt. I do have a few others, but in a couple of weeks, probably 3 or 4 weeks maybe, we'll get our first frost, and at that point the basil will go over. So it was going to have to come out of the ground. Anyways, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, click that bell icon to be notified when I do post a new video. This way you can follow along with my 30-day blitz. You can see if any of these survive come next spring. If any of these push up new growth, we will find out come next spring. I will be doing something else interesting tomorrow, because there's a lot to get done around this garden here during the fall, and I should have, well, I kind of knew this was coming. Obviously, the larger the garden gets, the more work there is to be done in it, and yeah, there's quite a bit to go. So, with all that being said, I'm going to catch you guys on the next one. Bye-bye.